early to be live.
One more run to the bathroom. I think that's.
Is it early to be alive?
That too.
There is never enough time.
I was gonna say alive.
No, it's my love so beautiful.
That's like my 5-year-old. Mommy, I gotta pee.
So we have 2 minutes. We'll wait until he comes back from the little conventioner's room. Hello, Twitch.
I always like to start it a couple minutes early because sometimes it takes it a little while to actually get going. So
Test your microphones while we're.
test the microphones up front.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, test.
Testing is talking, not
You
tapping.
don't have to talk. Well,
Hello
unless
there.
you want to talk.
No, you can leave them in front of you. Just talk so he can see if they pick you up. Talk where you are.
Talk where we are.
There you go. Talk where you are.
Talk about
Talk the
Nestor.
talk.
Nestor. How was everybody with Nestor? Any damage or anything?
One of our con members, she lives in Lakeland, and the school she teaches at, the roof was ripped off.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, so for those of you, anybody tuning in remotely, yes, we did live through a tropical storm Nestor who, woohoo, yeah. We got a lot of rain, but apparently there were some tornadoes. And I'm sorry that the video is a little angled for those of you watching. My tripod's a little crooked. So.
Everything good, Richard?
Do what?
Everything good?
Yeah. Plumbing's checking out.
Yeah. Yes. Twitch, the hotel bathrooms. I know there's a project where big relief everybody needs to do. Yeah.
Big relief.
Start getting a lot of messages, yes.
Be worried about it.
Cassie. Throw a
Okay,
message
so
into the
it's
group.
10 o'clock.
Where is everybody?
Do we want to wait for anyone else to come in
The
from breakfast?
Snooze, lose.
Yeah, if you snooze, you lose.
Well, I don't know, we have a legion of people out there on Twitch waiting us for us.
That's true.
Yeah.
All of our invisible audience.
Entertain, enlighten, and
That's right.
elevate, so.
Yes. So this is the panel Needs More Vampires. It's all about the stories and movies that had vampires and the stories and movies that could have used vampires. So I thought we could go down the line and
I think
introduce
ordinary
ourselves.
people. Always thought that.
Yeah. So let's go down the line and introduce ourselves. I'm Daisy Farnham. I'll be the moderator for this panel. And I have been watching vampire movies and shows since I was a little, probably in an inappropriate age. Just don't watch it if you're a vampire when you're 5 years old. Let's go down.
My name is Shannon Mayer, and I primarily write urban fantasy. I have a lot of vampires in my books, usually as secondary characters and as foils to my protagonists, but I also have watched a lot of vampire-related movies, and so I'm excited to be on this panel and discuss our favorite books.
I'm Richard Lee Byers. I write fantasy and horror. My most recent book is Citadel of Gold. You can find that and all my stuff on Amazon. I've written a fair amount of vampire fiction. I'm currently writing something that has Dracula and vampires in it now, although that's just one element of a greater brouhaha.
Armand Rosamilia. I write horror and crime thrillers, and I grew up on watching vampire movies and stuff. And I was trying to think, I haven't actually written a vampire into a story in quite a number of years, so it's kind of fun to come back to it.
Okay, so I thought we'd go down the line and talk about what our favorite vampire story is. I actually have a list of various vampire. It's not exhaustive, there's Buffyverse, there's the Bram Stoker, there's Anne Rice, we have Underworld, True Blood, Vampire Diaries. Going even old school, it's Carmilla, I believe, was it?
So Jay Sheridan O'Fenner? Yeah.
Yeah. So if we could just go down the line and say what our favorites is, mine is the Buffyverse.
So I kind of cut my teeth, as it were, on Anne Rice and actually the original Vampire Diaries. I think I was about 10 years old when I started reading them. And so as an adult, to see that come back into the popular mainstream, I was shocked. And then I went and I found my old books, and I remember thinking they were so amazing when I was 10, and then I read them and I was like, okay, no, I can see where I was at 10. But and then Anne Rice, of course, loved her vampires.
I guess I would just say is still Dracula. By Bram Stoker, I thought a really good vampire novel that came out very recently from Ramsey Campbell, who's one of my favorite horror writers, and I think the title was something like 13 Days by Sunset Beach. If that's not the title, it's real close, and you can find it. I thought that was was quite a good book. Of course, I always think his books are quite good, but I didn't like them.
I actually, when I was very little, I watched like this stuff that really, in a weird way, like Evan Costello meets, the Mummy or, Dracula and those. And then as I got older, Salem's Lot was huge for me as a kid. I mean, it scared the heck out of me. And it didn't help that my brother would knock on the window and open the window when we were kids. And then Interview with the Vampire as a reader when I started. I mean, that was very big in that whole series. I mean, going through even some of the kind of hits and misses. And then it was cool because my name is really Armando, but Armand, I go by Armand. So when Armand came out, everybody thought I had made it up. Like when I was subbing in the '90s for zines and stuff, and they were like, "Okay, well, what's your real name?" I'm like, "No, that's my real name." I'm like Armand Lestat. I'm not gonna do something stupid like that. That was kind of funny.
So let's just get right into the topic. How can any show you can think of be improved by vampires? I believe that Brooklyn Nine-Nine can be improved. It is an amazing show, it's hilarious. But imagine if Captain Holt was a vampire and his husband was not. So I just think that I got a face for the audience, yes. Because Captain Holt is already so straight-laced, and you just see him like drinking like, I don't know, a glass of blood with a straw, like a little crazy straw, and his straight-faced demeanor. I just think it would be hilarious.
Well, I actually just watched Pride and Prejudice and Zombies recently, and so when I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking really you could take any real true classic and add vampires to it and really give it a different twist. I mean, I think that's the beauty of supernatural creatures and elements is you can take them and put them anywhere. And for people who enjoy that, it would improve any story. I mean, Pride and Prejudice, depending on who you ask, can be a bit slow in places, but man, you add a little supernatural to it and it suddenly gets very interesting very quickly. So I think the truth can be said for vampires. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see more classics brought forward and show some of the undead in it.
I don't know. I didn't realize we're gonna deal with a specific question, so I didn't really think about it. But I mean, I kind of have a perverse thing that I kind of like to think, what would make things really strange and kind of wreck them in a funny way, so really anything that's really intended to be serious and make you think about the human condition. Vampires, throwing vampires in it would work for me, or something that's just like it would be so off. It's like I Love Lucy with serious vampires
Lucy
destroying the fabric of the city or whatever, and making it hazardous every time. It's like, you got Ethel. Oh no, I would certainly watch that.
Lucy as a vampire who could only drink blood, trying to eat the chocolates.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, any of those, like, Great Gatsby, halfway through, we've thrown a vampire for no reason. Or basically, you make every Jimmy Stewart movie who's a vampire in that movie.
Yeah, Mr. Deeds goes to Washington and drinks blood.
Drinks blood.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the glowing eyes and Gatsby are for.
Well, it's like I think it's interesting that there's actually a story where the vampires just are suddenly there halfway through, which is From Dusk Till Dawn.
Right. Yeah, that's what
it's like you got this crime story, and then all of a sudden, oh, now it's vampires.
That would be interesting to put like a twist in. You think it's a straight police procedural or a straight romance? Yes, a romance. And then suddenly it's vampires, and the entire movie world inside the movie is normal. Like, they know vampires existed, they just haven't been talking about them for 2 hours because it pop up in conversation. And the audience is like, wait, were we supposed to know from the beginning? Because you keep things from your audience that your characters may know, and vice versa, which I think is funny. What kind of vampire? Because we have from the original Count Orlok, right? Count Orlok from the original silent film
Yeah.
to Myers, Sparkle Pyres. So what vampires would work best, I think, for the drama?
Well, I mean, I think other than the obvious sparkling vampires that we all know, I think your classic, sun will kill them, drinking blood. That's going to be the most it's going to be the most visual, especially for movies and TV. I mean, it's really hard to express in TV always like a psychic vampire who's just draining energy versus blood. It's less obvious. And so I would say that yes, a classic vampire is going to work the best. Maybe not dressed up in the whole like high, collar cape, because that's maybe too obvious.
That's the beauty of it.
If they just float around like Hotel Transylvania, like I do not say blah blah blah, that's a little too obvious. But for for that intensive purposes, I would say blood drinkers straight up.
Why, I really like, by and large, the evil, demonic vampires as opposed to the tragic, misunderstood kind of vampires. That's just me, although I think that, the others certainly can work in a particular story. It's all just, what you want to write at a particular time. Some of my favorite vampires lately are the ones that, on What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
The movie was great, and I think the TV show is also great. So I really like them, especially the elder one who was a Eastern European warlord in his time. I really like that guy.
For me, it's always been like that 30 Days a Night, that really on the cusp of just completely insane, bloodthirsty, and there's an intelligence there, but it's so overridden because of just basically jumping on people and ripping them apart. To me, that's always the scariest. I mean, it goes back to zombies when they remade Dawn of the Dead, where fast-running zombies. Like, people went crazy, like that was an awful thing, but for me, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary to see a whole mob of people running at you, and they're not gonna get tired, and they're gonna rip you apart. For me, that was the thing.
So I'm glad you brought up What We Do in the Shadows, because that gives a look, I want to say, into the social infrastructure of if vampires actually existed. Because you would have a whole gamut of vampires. There are these little girl vampires who are forever stuck in little girl bodies, just like in Interview with a Vampire, and they use it to catch very, very bad men who do very bad things to little girls. And so I think that having vampires in the real world, like if we lived in a society where we had vampires as day-to-day living beings, they would find niches to exploit to help society and to be to the detriment of society, just like people are. So how do you think the history of the world would have changed if we had had vampires evolving alongside us, like from Adam and Eve on down?
And you mean they're out in the open and we?
Yes, they're out of the coffin.
They're out of the coffin.
And we deal with, they're just part of life, yeah.
People.
Okay.
I think we could go on and just be a lot of vampires.
And then there wouldn't be very many vampires. Yeah.
I think you'd see a lot of politicians that slept during the day. And I think that you would see a totally different system in terms of food structuring, because we would no longer be at the top of the food chain. So just, I think it'd be set up very, very differently. I don't think we'd be love and life the way, I think it would be more, I almost feel like it would be almost medieval in the sense you'd have a hierarchy of like kings and lords, and then you'd have the serfs, and then you'd have the food.
We'd be the
And
food.
we'd be the food.
We'd
We'd be the cattle.
We'd be the pets.
Yeah, we would. And the pretty ones would be kept a little higher up, just like the chihuahuas and the pretty, dogs and cats, and also
There
pretty
was
ones.
a vampire with a little girl in purse.
Well, I think that if the vampires were, if they were, everybody said, okay, they're vampires, and then we shouldn't go to war with those vampires. that, you would have, they would naturally kind of be the aristocracy, if only through the miracle of compound interest, you know,
Yeah.
they'd be the really rich old money people.
Well-
And I also think that you'd have a lot of people whose great ambition in life would be to be turned and gain that immortality.
Yeah, that's, you know, that would make the most sense.
I have a question. In this vampire society, would you have vampires that would view humans as cattle and basically, oh, they're just animals, they're cattle, and then other vampires would be like, no, even though they're not vampires, they're, you know, they have a quality of life. We can't treat them like animals.
I'm sure there would be.
Would they be this?
Are
battle of
human
the
beings
vampires?
sentient? Do we have free range humans?
Well, I mean, I think that you might have, I think that you would probably have at least a part of the vampire society, maybe the dominant part was that, you know, we can't push these beings too hard, or the mortals too hard, or they will rise up. And, you know, there's gotta be a system where, you know, we're not just people and all that stuff. And then you probably have some vampires who'd be like, but the thrill of the hunt, baby, you know.
But I think if you take it back to, if we really, like, very hypothetical, but if vampires were really around at the dawn of humanity, we wouldn't know any different,
Yeah.
right? If they were in charge right from the beginning, we wouldn't know any different. That would be my spin on it.
That brings up a good point. If we're going with the classic vampires who turn to dust in daylight, would they still be in charge? Because humans are sort of,
They create a religion around it.
they would, yeah.
And they would also have people who
Enforce that.
enforce it.
Absolutely, they have, and they would,
Sympathizers.
it's a hierarchy again.
Yes.
It's the priests who take care of family during the day.
At night, those people are safe.
That's right, yeah. Oh, yeah, the whole hierarchy,
Okay,
as if it's real.
okay. So this is more of a bleak outlook. The
You're
realistic,
hoping for
but-
evil.
Well, not for the vampires, I don't know.
Before that, I want to circle back to that, of what he said, of we can't push those humans. Because, I mean, you can look at human history and yes, you've had revolts. Yes, priests were protected, whatever, in any society. But there was a point at which people sat down going, are we gonna take this anymore? And the answer was no. And then you had the revolt.
I think too, like that's also, like, again, this is hypothetically speaking, but if vampires are ruling, and they're a ruling class that is pretty consistent across the world, because they all have very specific needs. It's not like, you know, if you look at America and England and Australia, they have different kind of needs and trade, like if they're all run by the same type of creature, I think we would have a significant problem.
Well, in Melissa F. Wilson's books, she's got a hierarchy where you've got the vampires, the werewolves, and the witches, and then you've got humans who don't know anything about the supernatural. But the vampires, they have humans who work for them, who are trusted humans who watch over them, you know, their lairs, their homes, whatever, while they're asleep, you know, and they're very valued people, but, you know, they're still vampires, you know, and they, you know, they can do, you know, do things to you, so.
There's potential in that kind of a society that we wouldn't even consider them vampires. We wouldn't know what killed them. You know, they might protect what they are so carefully that we wouldn't even know that sunlight, or, you know what I mean? Like, we don't know what kind of mythology would be built up around them to protect them.
all right, so you don't think it's possible that, I know, I was thinking of an alternative interpretation, just really quick, that because vampires need blood to survive, so they would have to keep us around, even just as a food source. But that does create an inherent possibility of the rise up and the revolution. But if they could give us something in trade, not even just the immortality aspect, like a dying human would become a vampire, but if they had some kind of medical advancements possible with their scientists, or even their blood or venom or whatever they have in their veins, or that could cause discoveries, so it would be almost symbiotic relationship instead of parasitical. Do you think that's possible, or would it just be absolutely the vampires rule the world and we're just a little cat?
I think you'd have all different types of vampires with different agendas. You know, it wouldn't be where they're all just focused on let's just have them as cattle. You know, you're always going to have those like rogue vampires who just want to live for today, and they're going to drink as much as they want, not worry about the food source tomorrow. And then you're gonna have the other ones that are culling specific people. You know, they might find that certain, you know, maybe type O negative is as cliche as that is that's the best.
Special.
That's the special, that tastes the best. So, you know, you're gonna have all these different kinds of, it's a society.
And it really would depend on the writer writing it.
Yes.
Because some writers are gonna be more utopian, and some writers are gonna be dark and savage. I'm guessing you might have 3 savages on the panel.
Well, I mean, it's all really speculative, because if we do talk about vampires that are out since the dawn of time, it's, you know, it's really hard to kind of predict what that means for both the vampire psyche and the human psyche. I mean, if some cows turned into people, would you feel the same way about eating a hamburger? It's really hard to know. If from the dawn of time there was this kind of alternate species in charge of everything, would human values and self-concept be the same, or would humans kind of have a more dog-like attitude?
I think they would,
Yeah.
I mean, if I were a vampire and I wanted to keep people in line, I'd make sure they weren't real smart. Like, don't give them written language, don't let them learn, because
But even there, it's just like, well, if they're in charge, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in the nature of
it
things.
is the nature of things. All right, anyone would get eaten that decided to argue.
Well, they kind of be playing with the apes with vampires.
Yeah.
Now there's something to be improved by vampires.
That was my answer.
Yeah, right.
So quick question, have any of you ever read anything by Jacqueline Lichtenberg? So she has this series of books that she wrote with Jean Laura, the Syme Gen novels. And what they are is the Syme, they are humanoid, but they have tentacles, and basically they absorb the life energy from the Gen. And so they keep them in breeding pens, they don't educate them, it's their pets. They don't find out until they hit maturity, though, if a child is going to be a Syme or a Gen, so they grow up as human to that point, and then if they don't develop the tentacles, they go in the pens. And so the first book is all about a boy and girl who really loved each other, and she becomes a Gen, he becomes a Syme, and then they eventually find out that actually these two species need each other to live. So it's not a matter of taking until the one dies, it's a symbiotic relationship. So it's a really good series, but to me, it's not your traditional vampire, but it is a vampiric type series where you you have the Planet of the Apes type thing, they're in breeding pens, but it turns out that they really should be partners. So it's kind of...
And it's actually a mutation in the future. It's actually a mutation.
A mutation in the future, right?
Yeah.
All right, so bottom, good point. If it's from the dawn of history, everything has changed. We wouldn't know any difference. It would be the pets and the owners. What if they just came out of the closet like right now? I'm going into the True Blood type scenario here. So a certain portion of the population is vampires, and we realize it, or they reveal themselves, or it's an accident. Somehow we all find out. The entire world finds out at the exact same time that there is a percentage of vampires, but we don't know who they are.
I think there would be a lot of suspicion on certain types of people, like politicians would get, like, right off the bat, people would be like, I knew it, you're a bloodsucker, like, you get that.
Lawyers.
Right? Lawyers, right, you get a lot of that, but I think you get a lot of fear, just like you would in bringing any new culture into what we consider ours, right, which is a slideshow of humanity at its finest,
Well, I think you would certainly have some people who would say, let's identify them and get them, destroy them. I think you'd have governments who would say, let's identify them and weaponize them. And I think that you would also have people who would say, well, they're people too.
I wanna have sex with them.
I want to have sex with a vampire, or I want to become a vampire. I think you'd have all different kind of attitudes.
I have a vision of, you remember on Independence Day when they're excited, they're waiting with signs on the top of the roof?
Yeah.
And they're so excited for the aliens to come, welcome, and then they all die. And I think there would be some people like that. They'd be like, yay, vampires, and they're like, oh shit.
I think it'd just be like True Blood. Everybody would be very pretty, and we'd all just have constant sex with each other.
I like that idea better, but.
Yeah. And we all wanna have sex with Suki, every damn one of us. Yeah.
I was getting so sick of it, I'm like, all right, enough of her naked.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't they get married and is that how they fell in love? Like
They got married.
Stephen Moyer and Anna Paquin?
I don't know.
Yep,
Maybe.
that's where they met.
Is it going for them?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've been focusing on the real world as much as vampires could be possible, and the past. So let's go on to the future. We have genres, science fiction genre. What kind of stories with space exploration? I mean, even the mythological vampire. It doesn't have to be that type of vampire. We could explore these space and find a planet where there are literal vampires. So what kind of stories do you think could happen or in the future where humanity finds an alien so unlike our mythology that we just call them vampires no matter what they call themselves?
Well, there certainly are stories like that. I mean, it's like, if you read, C.L. Moore's story Shamblo from way back in, I think it was published in Weird Tales. That's a kind of vampire story. It just occurred to me, I mean, you can, so I'd say you certainly write stories where somebody goes out in space, or something from outer space comes to here and it winds up humans versus you know, a vampire-like creature. It occurs to me that one interesting science fiction possibility, though, is if we posit that world where the vampires are in charge, and a big part of the reason that keeps them in charge is that, well, you know, if you were really nice to the vampires and really useful to the vampires, they'll make you a vampire too, and then you'll be immortal. What happens in that world when medical science advances to the point where there's another form of immortality becoming available, and the vampires are starting to, suddenly, you know, they don't have that carrot to dangle anymore.
I think, like, for me, in terms of the future, I mean, look at some of the medical treatments now for, like, beauty. Like, there's I just saw this the other day, microneedling, and they use your blood, and they pump it back into your face, and so you have, like, your face looks like it's covered in blood. So Kim Kardashian picture is crazy. So I could
Of course,
see,
it would be Kim Kardashian.
right? But you could see how, like, using blood as a form to heal could go, like, too far. You could get, like, medical experiments that just take that step too far, and suddenly they've created someone who craves it, and that person, like a virus, would spread. So to me, that's, like, I could see a story like that in terms of, like, sci-fi going forward. I think that would be interesting. She tried to make her face too pretty, and now
She's Countess Bathory.
yeah, exactly.
Kim Kardashian is Countess Bathory. That's a fan fiction story.
Kanye West is her little helper.
Gilles de Retz, was that his name?
Anyway.
Oh, no, he was the serial killer, but he was actually associated with Joan of Arc. Yeah, he was her right-hand man until her life.
Isn't there a great Buck Rogers episode where they meet the vampire? I mean, that's a classic. That's the future right
There
there.
you go.
So let's open up to the audience. Do you have anything any shows you love that you think would be improved by vampires, or just society itself? Who do you think is a vampire in disguise?
Steve Mnuchin. Just look at the guy, he looks like Nosferatu.
Well, I was gonna say Donald Trump because he got turned at a very bad time and never quite healed properly.
I was thinking some of these supermodels that, like, you know, they're like 60 years old and they look like they're 20.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, how is that possible? What are you doing? You look that good, that long.
Well, if you go off of the standard trope of vampires not aging, only drinking blood, look, there's a lot of people that we deal with in life who could be an energy vampire,
Oh, yeah.
sucking out all of your energy,
Absolutely.
or people's goodwill, you know, anything
money.
like that.
The money guy,
They can be butt ugly, you know, and politicians are up there on my list, definitely.
I remember reading that it was an anthology, Vampire Diaries, so my apologies, I can't remember the author's name. But the short story was basically that there was a society where we knew vampires existed, and of course everyone wanted to be turned. This is very exciting. This young man, I believe his name was Bill, was going to be turned. He got turned, and what he didn't realize is that it didn't make you beautiful, it just froze you where you were, and he had bad skin and bad teeth, and he thought he was gonna get laid all the time, and he didn't, he still had a hard time finding ladies. And it was following his kind of journey, he was still basically human, just now he needed blood instead of food, and he still couldn't, he didn't have enough money, he couldn't pay. It was a really interesting take on it, that it didn't magically solve all of his problems, and I think sometimes when we think about vampire stories and we read them, the character becomes a vampire, and it kind of solves so many problems in their life, and it was a really eye-opening take, that it really doesn't change anything, you still gotta figure your shit out.
It's not like you suddenly, if you're a vampire now, all of a sudden you have all the money in the world.
Right,
Like
exactly.
you can basically be unemployed for like 100
Right,
years.
right, exactly, you know, if your boobs are lopsided, they're still lopsided, and you're screwed.
This is a question for the panel, because I'd like to know how that happened. Again, books, movies, art form are a reflection of society. When Dracula was created as a book, or we had Nosferatu in the silent films, these were hideous, horrible, terrible creatures that you were afraid of, and it scared you, and you were frightened of them, and you were going to run away. Now we got, sparkly vampires who are, oh, I want to be a vampire because I'm young and beautiful, and my hair, and I'll have the sparkly eyes. How do we go from there to there?
I like Hollywood. Well,
But but Hollywood is a reflection. See, Hollywood is a reflection of society.
the first vampire story, was that Barney the Vampire?
I think it might have been.
I mean, he was a hideous creature in the book. He was to be pitied, and he considered himself grotesque and ugly. And the next popular vampire story was Camilla, Camilla, who was a lesbian and had a lesbian lover, and I think that became kind of sexy because obviously back then, just the idea of lesbians would have been woo titillating for anyone. And of course, then we have, once film happened, we had Count Orlok, who was hideous, but then we also had, who's that famous actor?
Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi, who of the time might have been considered handsome. I mean, he was certainly more prettier than Count Orlok. So I think it starts out ugly. Yeah, it starts out ugly and kind of gets sexy, and now we're stuck in the sexy mode because all of our movie stars and teen TV show stars are well, they're pretty. Just with the makeup and the casting choice, we get pretty people. And so we tell a vampire story, and with Vampire Diaries or with Buffyverse and Angel, they're all pretty, and then sometimes when they transform, that's when the ugly happens because it reflects the inner demon who is ugly inside, and so that's the battle.
And that's the reflection just on anybody, right? Like, you could be the most beautiful person in the world on the outside and still a real asshole underneath it all, right? Which I think is really, vampires are meant to be a reflection of humanity.
One of the series that I was talking about earlier, when the vampires in it shift, they become ugly, swampy-looking creatures, absolutely disgusting, and the other characters are like, oh, I don't want it, don't touch me, ew,
Yeah. I think that the fact that you have, tragic noble vampires now, or beautiful vampires, or tragic noble vampires now, or heroic vampires now, and you didn't used to, is related to a degree to the idea that, vampires were fundamentally embodiments of evil as defined in religious terms, and they were inherently of the devil. As I think society became more secular, people started to find that argument less compelling. They started to look at vampires and say, well, you're immortal, it's not necessarily that bad. And once you start thinking in those terms, then the heroic vampire becomes much more thinkable.
I think too, as writers, we're not reinventing the wheel, but you want to try something a little different. You start going with different things. Zombies is the same thing. I mean, you started seeing,
More bodies.
yeah, like more bodies or Zombie Land. I mean,
Yeah,
funny,
super funny, yeah.
funny things. And I think with vampires especially too, there are, which I think is great, there's a lot of pushback on that. They're like, no, let's make them super evil now, which is great. Just do something different with it, I don't want to read Dracula over and over and over and over again, but I also don't want to read sparkly vampires over and over again. So there's so many different.
You get in trouble with so many. Right now.
There's so many different ways to write any monster now, which is great.
All right, do you have any other questions or comments from the audience?
Actually, I do.
Yes.
Do you think that advances in science, just the amazing advances from the time that we started the space program to today, do you think that that may also play into some of the changes in how vampires are portrayed? Because we know more, we understand more of science.
Well, it definitely gives you material to work with if you want to posit a more science fictional vampire as opposed to a fantasy vampire like in Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, you know, or something like that. There's more stuff you can look at and try to throw in to make it compelling. I mean, Matheson obviously wrote that book decades and decades ago, and it's a science fictional treatment of marriage. But if if you wrote it today, you could throw in a whole bunch of stuff about genetics or whatever that he
Well,
didn't know at the time.
look at Brian Lumley, Necroscope.
Yeah.
From when he started, it was just kind of like the vampires that were just kind of, and then as the series progressed over how many years, then he started, then we had AIDS. Then we're going to add that into the book. Then we're going to add all this actual real life stuff into the series. And it's an interesting series to read from the beginning because you can almost tell what year he was writing these short stories or these books. As stuff came up, as new science came out, he added it to the story, and it fit really well. It was just a natural progression of what's going on, which is exactly what you're talking about.
On the science side, we kind of actually do have vampires in our society in a way because there are medical conditions where people keep having to get blood. So scientifically, that's they need blood, so you could, in a fictional setting, you could have somebody who has that disorder that, they prey on people because there's not enough of that blood type, I need that blood type, so they take their blood and do it. So, and so you've got a scientific reason. I mean, our stepfather had a blood disorder where he had to go in and keep getting blood constantly, so it's kind of...
Well, I mean, and you see echoes of that, like the people that are allergic to the sun. Like I have a family member, distant family member, her 2 children are allergic to the sun quite badly, and so they actually moved to Oregon. They lived in LA because their kids couldn't go outside. Like, and like they're super pale, they look anemic. I mean, they're not allowed outside, and you can imagine even 20 or 30 years ago, you put that into a small community, and people are going to talk.
Oh,
and
yeah.
be like, what's wrong with these kids? Are they possessed? Are they vampire? Whatever. And so, and then again, it's like some jam on their lips and you're screwed, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of speculation that vampire legends have their source, at least partially, in real medical conditions that people had back in the Dark Ages or whatever. Like I think there's a called porphyria, where your gums pull back from your teeth and it makes it look like you got fangs. That probably wasn't good.
Yeah.
A good luck at that time.
Combination of
Yeah.
things,
Yeah. And there's also another element that people think may have played into the vampire thing is that they weren't as sophisticated as we are about seeing that somebody was really, truly, sincerely not coming back dead. So occasionally, they had occasion to open a coffin. It's like the guy, he goes, "Oh, somebody was clawing, trying to get out of here."
The thing with the bell, they used to hang a bell with a string so that way if they really weren't dead, they could ring the bell and they would know that they were still alive.
That was like a 19th century Victorian kind of a thing.
There were historical skeletal finds where they've been bricks in people's mouths because to stop fangs from coming out, because they thought, due to decomposition, things recede, so they thought the hair got bigger, the nails grew, teeth came out, so like, oh my god, this creature is still alive after death. Smash him, bash him, stick a brick in his mouth.
Sorry, Uncle George, but
You have to really make sure you're dead. Hold still.
Yeah.
Very graphic panel today, sorry. Yes.
Maybe this has already been done, but I'd like to see a retooling of like John Carpenter's The Thing, where they're trying to just determine in a closed group who is the alien, but instead it would be who is the vampire. I don't think I've seen anything like that recently, and I think that would be a good story.
Well, you'd have to eliminate some of the traditional vampire weaknesses that are pretty easy, wouldn't it?
Who sleeps all day?
Yeah, right.
Well, they're trapped in Antarctica during the 6 months of winter.
Yeah.
A bunch of scientists. A twist is.
Or in space?
In space.
Yes.
Because you mentioned traditional vampire restrictions. I have a question. I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and in the book, the vampire could come out during the day. He was just in a weakened state.
It's like
So he
supernatural.
wasn't as strong at night. So he could go out, couldn't be in direct sunlight, but could be amongst humans. So traditionally, could vampires walk during the day?
Again, I think it depends on the writer. I mean,
Which tropes you're really using.
Yeah.
With vampires, we have so many now, and other authors have added to that where it's become, that becomes part of the legend or what you have to write.
The weakness to sunlight, the sunlight killing them didn't come up until that silent movie. Before that, they were just weakened.
As writers, of course, you can do whatever you want as long as you're consistent and that suits your particular story. And so there's a lot of variation, but even if you go back to actual mythology and folklore, there's a lot of variation. There's not like one worldwide vampire myth that every culture has in common. Cultures came up with a whole diversity of vampire-like beings, each with their own quirks. So, you can grab what you want.
And it's always interesting to see too how different writers come up to circumvent those issues. Like, I think it was Blade where they used like sunblock.
Yeah.
And the vampires went out in the sun, but they just had to have stuff, so they looked a little shiny, and it was kind of funny. Like, I mean, but it was a way around it.
I remember that scene so well. Didn't it? The one guy had his sunblock on because he was a made vampire. He was originally human, got bit, became a vampire. But the vampire man who was natural born vampire, that still wouldn't work for him. So they all stood around and like they held the guy to kill him as the sun was rising, and the people with the block were okay, and then he just melted like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes.
So, if there were vampires among us in modern day, I think that they would do everything possible to make sure that the old tropes are still being trotted out.
Misdirection.
Yes, so that people would not suspect them, because maybe vampires have always been able to walk around in the daytime, just in a more weakened state.
Well, and you could even say like maybe they evolved, maybe they started off drinking blood and were able to evolve into more psychic vampires and drawing off energies, right? So
What about psychic vampires is so funny? Come on.
Because that's
Share
one
with
of my,
us.
I'm like, that's one of my favorite characters in What We Do in the Shadows. I'm like,
Oh, I
okay.
like that guy.
I have, because it's like, the rest of them are kind of ridiculous and funny, but that guy is like, well, wait a minute, I really know somebody like that. But they come near you, and it's like, la, 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 and you're like,
I think he had the best line in the whole first season where he was like talking to the camera because it's like The Office, they all speak directly to the camera from time to time. He says, "Is the other vampire like, I'm immortal? Yeah, try being immortal at brunch."
it's like, yeah, that
Because
one is
they
the
do
scary
put
one
different
because I'm
flavors,
like,
right?
there could be people like that,
Yeah.
okay, where they evolved. I mean, haven't we heard the phrase, oh my God, he just sucked the energy out of the room?
yeah, and so like with what you were saying is like I think you could have that. It would be another interesting way to take the story. It's the evolution of vampires so that they keep the old tropes up, so when they do become outed, maybe those tropes don't apply anymore.
And if we're talking about from the beginning of time, look how much we've advanced.
Absolutely.
The vampires would also advance, and maybe they figured out a way to get around those
They could have
things.
been Neanderthal vampires back in the beginning, right? And clumsy and great big fangs they couldn't fight with. I mean, I don't know, like vampires.
And if you live long enough, think of all the knowledge that you get.
Or does their brain, like, do they have just chronicles, like journals they filled with all their knowledge? Or does their brain actually hold it all?
Well, we only have like 10% of our brain, so I'd like to
Oh my God, that's such a.
Well, the other way of conceiving of it is that they get set in their ways, and then don't advance with the times anymore.
Crazy old man.
Yeah.
Oh, who still yells at cars and tries to ride his horse into town? It's like, no, you have to drive a car now. No, I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
A chariot.
Yeah, you gotta get your Renfield to set up your internet connection for you because you just can't.
And having to,
Twelve, it won't stop thinking 12.
Yeah, right.
having to move every so often so people don't realize that, hey, you're not aging, having to up your
And it
routine.
would be, I mean, you see some of the stories where the vampires actually get tired of being immortal because they lose friends, they lose their connections, they lose a connection to the world. And I think even it was in Anne Rice's books that Armand talks about that, needing to find someone in the current era to help him make the transition more smoothly, because otherwise they go crazy. Which, yeah.
But just to fall in love with the mortal, you have X number of years with that person before they get old and die.
That's why I really like Twilight. The first book, I like the first book. The other ones kind of went off the rails. But when she says to him, I want to be a vampire too, and he says, I want to wait until you're matured enough, because he's stuck at 17, and he knows he's stuck at 17. He's been with the 17-year-old hormones and whatever, his acne or whatever it is, for 150 years. And she's now 17, and he's like, no, let's wait a bit, let's get you
So
older.
that extra year really makes a difference when you're a teenager.
He's like, I want a cougar.
Well, then in the sequel, they do that, and then she gets arrested for having sex with a minor.
They should have been in college.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it would be a choice. Let's say a vampire who's thousands of years old, and his partner, who has been thousands of years old with him, like, what was that one with? Oh, Adam and Eve. That's not the title of the movie, but it has Loki in it, and this queen. I can't remember either of their names. Tom Hiddleston. He was a vampire.
Crimson Peak?
No, not Crimson Peak.
Yeah, that's actually not a vampire story, it's a ghost story.
Yeah. So in that one, they're called Adam and Eve because the vampires are so old, and it has a lot of ennui and a lot of long camera takes and slow pacing. So he has commissioned a friend of his to make him wooden bullets because he's like reaching the end of his rope and he wants to die. And she finds out and stops them, and they run out of their blood supply, and they're about to face the fact that they're going to run out of blood, and they can either become monsters or let themselves fade. And at the very end, they find these two people, these two lovers. They see them across the street, and they think, well, we should give them the gift too. And so they obviously go off to have a meal. But I just find that interesting because you are so old that you can't stand living any longer. So maybe immortality isn't such a gift at that point. And so to find, if you already lost your partner and now you're alone, to find a human, a mayfly human, it's like, would you want to turn them immediately, or would you want to wait till they're older, or would you just let them die and get the new human? And it's like a series of pets over and over and over again.
But I think there's a supposition here that you're married, or your partner, the one you're with, you'd want to be with for 1,000 years, right? That is a pretty big jump. Like, like some people are like 30 years, that's it, man. Like, so I think you'd have a lot of like divorcing and like switching partners. Monogamy, the idea of monogamy would change because I think you get bored. Like you all have the same stories. Like unless you like, honey, you go live in Europe for a while, I'll stay in America for 50, 60 years, and we'll get back together. We'll share stories, talk about our, like it would be a totally different mind.
100 years married, 100 years divorced, 100 years married.
Could you imagine about 600 years in,
No,
you hear
I would kill
your
myself.
spouse tell that same joke
Again.
again?
Or you just stake them out of annoyance. Like if they're the type of vampire who just reform like Dracula sometimes does, you just stake him to get rid of them for a few days. So we have a few minutes left. Are there any more questions or comments from the audience about psychic vampires in your life that may be draining your energy? Perhaps coworkers?
This isn't a health group. This is
I have no real advice.
No.
Well, actually, I do. If you have someone in your life like that, stay.
A wooden stake through the heart will kill anything.
Yeah.
toothpicks right in the hand, that'll shut them up.
Or decapitation, burning, I'm all about the permanent solution.
Are you taking names?
I'm gonna do it for you. I'm just recommending it.
He's just an accessory.
Share the story and he can write about it.
So here's something just totally out of left field. What about vampires that are suffering from some of the same modern day things that people experience, like depression? Think about what it would be like to be a depressed vampire.
Oh, would a depressed vampire still have that one person who said you just need to eat and you feel better?
Are you hangry?
That's a great story. Yeah.
Hangry vampire.
Okay.
Have a Snickers
You're
bar.
right. I do feel better. Corpse on the floor.
I think yeah, I think it would be interesting, and I think it would, sometimes with, vampires, like a lot of the supernatural is an escapism, we wanna go into it because it would be better than our lives, and I think sometimes if we make it too dark, in the human psyche side of it, people will be like, oh my god, this is so true, and it's depressing because it's just like my life, and it's not any better, and that could be, it could be a very true type story.
It would just have to be really well written by perhaps someone on the panel.
What about the vampire as a human had celiac disease, gluten intolerance, and then when you drink the blood from somebody who's eaten gluten, they get sick.
Oh, a vampire who has like a human version of a wine cellar. He only likes drinking blood from one particular bloodline, so he makes sure they breed a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
Curates the family tree.
well, in Andy Warhol's Dracula, that movie from way back when, the Dracula has to drink the blood of virgins and he can't find any.
I
But,
was watching Carrie comedy vampire once bitten.
as far as what you said about depression is like, I think that when people are trying to relate vampires to emotional problems, sort of depression, loneliness, and alienation, the standard ones, you could posit, other psychological disorder, emotional disorders a vampire could have. It's like if they're having trouble keeping pace with the modern life, they could develop anxiety disorders. If their way of coping with a changing world is to develop some very very rigid habits. That's what I was going to say. OCD, very rigid habit patterns and stuff. They could have OCD. There are different things you could conceivably do.
And a vampire who's stuck on like an event that happened 40 years ago. He's like, oh my god, I can't believe I did that. Or 400 years ago. I'm so embarrassed. I wore the wrong dress during an event. Oh my god.
What if the vampire had agoraphobia? That would make it very hard to go out and find a meal.
That's what the Renfields are for.
Yeah.
Please bring me back a bag of.
Well, or you can just call for delivery.
Uber
It's like,
Eats.
Yeah.
it's like, it's like, I like a pizza delivered. What kind? Doesn't matter.
I like an Italian.
Yeah.
Italian pizza. No, an Italian delivery man.
Yeah.
No garlic.
But I don't think Renfields in modern day really are quite as good if they're ugly and they eat bugs. I think a vampire would want like a really
That's just Bear
hot-looking-
Grylls.
That's very good.
Bear Grylls.
Bugs.
Yeah.
and his own teeth. But yeah, no, think about it. They would want Renfields who were very, very attractive because then they would be able to
Lure the guys back.
Be like hiring a wedding organizer, just have a little notebook.
Mhm.
Everything's set up, here's your day planner, off you go.
An executive assistant.
He's an executive assistant type.
Tony Stark is a vampire and Pepper Potts is his assistant. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how he survived. Endgame?
No.
Okay.
I don't think he's survived.
No. No.
He's
Spoiler
okay.
alert.
He is alive and well, hiding in his cabin in the woods.
He's
Well,
a vampire.
alive and well in the comics. You can take comfort from that. But I think in the movie verse, he's
toast.
An ex-superhero.
This is
An ex-superhero.
No, he's on that image of
He's pushing up
Marvel's
the
What If
daisies.
logo in the top left. You can see Iron Man. So I don't know. Maybe he lives, maybe he doesn't.
Or maybe his daughter becomes the next Iron Man.
Yes.
Sounded like the
So we have 2 more minutes left. Does anyone have any last comments, or what do you think needs more vampires in your life? I would say fast food, because that would they need menial jobs too. So they would work night shifts at all the fast food restaurants. And that way, when you're really hungry at like 4 a.m. and Taco Bell's closed, you can still get something to eat. Vampires are.
And if you're out of money, you can just give them your arm.
Yeah. Well, it's CSL Plasma, so I mean, vampires run CSL Plasma.
Would that be too much of a temptation, though?
Well, no, because they mix it with the coagulant and it doesn't taste good anymore. But they know how the best way to get the veins. Anyone?
On that note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.